one of the things we have to focus on, though, and I didn't emphasize this so much because I was trying to get away from the, attitudes that are prevalent today and try to get people back onto the Torah's attitude is we have to take action. But one of those actions is joy. And that means to say that life is about being joyful. And that has two consequences. There are two primary roles in our life. One is that is the state of life, the natural state of every living thing is a joyful state of life. And we're supposed to be that way. So we have to recognize that the goal of everything that's coming to bombard us with negativity and fear is meant to take us off track, even if it's 100% true. So we have to say, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to be joyful. I'm going to dance with my kids. We're going to sing. We're going to play music. We're going to be joyful because that is what we are meant to be, every single human being. And we're not going to let other people distract us from that. The second point is that it is through the joy that we're able to break the boundaries. The boundaries are really the boundaries of our inaction. The only problem we face, if we're going to look at why is humanity still in exile? Why isn't everyone, completely know that there's nothing besides God Almighty? We've got 5,784 years under our belt. We could have figured this out already. And the real challenge that we have is that there's something inside of us that says, you know what? Let's put aside those lofty ambitions to know God and to talk about God, and let's focus on the physical experiences that we can have. And let's, bigger retirement accounts, let's have a better stake and so forth. And all those are beautiful things, but they take us off track. And the way you cannot break through those things. I mean, maybe theoretically you could break through those things by, studying yourself and studying lofty things and like getting a better perspective. But there's also a much simpler way, which is just if you're joyful, you automatically break through the boundaries. If you automatically go and presumptively live in the state of being joyful and happy and feeling God's love for you and feeling God's love for you flowing through and for everybody flowing through you to love your family members and help other human beings. If you live presumptively that way, then you just short circuit all the work that you need to do to get yourself on track, including not only being a joyous experience for yourself and for everyone around you that you're loving and interacting in a loving way, but in addition, you now have the strength to dismiss anything that's going to knock you off track, off your joy, and anything that's going to hold you back internally from taking action. So there's no room for the doubt. There's no room for the delay. There's no room for that. So really, if we all look and say, we have 8 billion human beings. What is needed? Everyone's here for a reason. You see, the idea that there's going to come a messianic redeemer and kind of do the job for everybody is not the Torah's idea. The Torah says that the ultimate real highlight of the messianic era is actually the state of mind of every human being, that they are going to be totally focused on the knowledge of God Almighty. The messianic redeemer, or Mashiach, is like a guide or a shepherd, but he can't do the walking for everybody. He can't, a shepherd of a flock can't make them walk. He can't do what that person needs to do, right? So the success of the messianic redemption goes hand in hand with the success of each person being revealed as a leader in his own space and among the people around him. The ability for that transformation to happen is that everyone sees, oh my goodness, I'm living in this great garden of 8 billion human beings. Each one of us has something to tend to, right? If you were in a factory and you had you would wonder, what am I doing here? There must be a role that the employer is paying me, right? You get a paycheck every week from the such and such motor company, and you open your eyes in the morning and you're in the plant, and he's paying you a salary, and you have to say, well, I must have a purpose here, and the purpose can't be solely devoted merely to taking care of my bodily needs through the day. I must have a purpose that extends beyond that, that both what I do for my bodily needs is in conjunction with what my employer has brought me here to do. And also, I have something to contribute to the grand effort that this entire process is putting into effect. So every human being is like, we're in God Almighty's great grand design. So we have 8 billion human beings that are all of infinite significance. It says that if one human being dies or is killed, that is an entire world that's been destroyed. So like the contribution of each human being is like an entire world. So what keeps us from this is we have all kinds of confused ideas. You know, I was speaking to somebody the other day, how the army, on one hand, seems to train people that are, active and taking action and so forth. But the other hand debilitates people and its participants because it trains them that you're only a leader to the extent that the superiors decide that you're a leader, and everyone else is just like a nobody. And even the mid-range leaders are only because of the consensus of the peer review of the superiors. And the end result is neutralizing every person's independent spirit that he is a leader because God Almighty made him a leader, not because his peers decided that he has this is his ceiling on his leadership capabilities. So what it does is it neutralizes in an army that is training people that way, which is all the armies today. No one has the breadth of mind to see themselves as someone who could take their family, their community, their nation in a completely improved direction. It's interesting, if you go back to it's the 1600s and the 1700s, you saw that there were people in the military who saw themselves as some of the prime movers or capable of starting entirely new countries. They were not beholden to the system that they grew up in the military system they grew up in. They saw that they could replace the entire military hierarchy and come out with a better system and a better sense of accountability for the military and a better more direct connection to the Creator. These are how a person is supposed to be. You're supposed to bring your children up. We're supposed to bring up children to think that they are the leaders, not because someone appointed them and not because someone approved them, but because they are created by God Almighty to be leaders. And God Almighty will decide the range, the extent of your leadership, but your leadership is built into you. So you may be a leader over one person or two people in a family, or with children, more people, and maybe a block of people and a community of people, and so on and so forth. But you're a leader, and God Almighty will guide you and open the door for you to take on more extended and expanded leadership. But you have to be ready to go walk through that door. If you're closing yourself down and saying, "Oh, I can't do that. That's not for me. I'm not meant to do any of these things," then what's happening is you're actually defeating God's purpose. You don't know how far God Almighty wants you to go to be of service to your fellow human being. So when you see that every one of the 8 billion human beings is here for an essential purpose, and you ask yourself, what's my essential purpose? It's not to follow the orders of other human beings, and it's not to resign myself to that other human beings have things that are doing things that I can't change. I may not know how to bring about a change in the mindset of other people because I may still be working on changing my own mindset and aligning it with God Almighty's vision for me and for the world. But I know that that's where the frontier goes. That's where I'm supposed to be headed. And therefore, I see my role in the world among the 8 billion people as absolutely indispensable, because my role is crafted individually for me by God Almighty, who's lovingly and intentionally recreating me at every instant. I have this infinitely valuable contribution to make to the entire enterprise of these 8 billion human beings, and may they increase to 80 billion human beings. Mm-hmm. The same applies for you. same applies to you. You have this infinite contribution that you can't even measure or imagine. So what's the only thing that holds us back is our self-limitation that doesn't want us to expand into that. And that's what joy is needed for, to break out of that. It's not just if I'm happy, it's going to send happy waves over there and produce a good result. That's also a good thing, but it means that out of my happiness, I will shift into a mode of action. There will be no more restraints and bondages holding me back from taking action. And instead, I will move into action, and everything I'm doing is going to be propelling this activity into the world. Excuse me, because it says mitzvah goreres mitzvah. When I do something to connect myself with God Almighty, a mitzvah, commandment, divine commandment, then I will cause another commandment to occur, another fulfillment of God's will, not just by myself, but by other people. So we end off with a intensifying experience of being on track more and more consistently, more and more of the time, more and more enthusiastic, and more and more enthusiastic, and more able to break through these internal restraints to actually be an example for everybody else. And if you can imagine 8 billion people like that, Mashiach, the righteous Redeemer, is going to be like the one who it's going to be such a delight, because the people that he's going to be leading are all going to be effectively of the same mindset as him. He's going to be a king of the Jews and an advisor to the world. It's going to be a delight. It's going to be a delight of just positivity and positive things happening. So that's what we're looking forward to. So we have to start that now. We have to get ourselves grounded in that joy, and not be moping around in our own self-centered self-pity about our own situation, or the troubles of the generation, thinking that somehow we're mismatched and have nothing to offer and it's beyond us. No, on the contrary, it must be, if it's happening now in our times, in our generation, it must be that I have what's needed to add to this, to contribute, not merely as 1 over 8 billion, that my contribution is 1 over 8 billion, 1/8 billionth of a contribution to the world, but it's actually reversed. My contribution is worth 8 billion over 1, because my putting myself wholly as in completely into this mission, I am like the whole world. The whole world is 8 billion people. So my one person activity is like 8 billion over 1. I have the effect of 8 billion people, as do all the other 8 billion people. So we actually get a much, much greater effect. So that's how we're supposed to each look at ourselves. So this brings us to the topic of prayer, because I was invited to a chasana tonight, to a wedding of a cousin by marriage. And originally I RSVP'd that I'm going to come. And I took stock of what's really the calling that what can I maximally offer into the world tonight? Well, being here for this learning together, and for the people who are going to watch this after, is the maximal contribution. Maybe not the maximal contribution, but it is the most, between the choice of the two. I was divinely guided, if we listen to the God Almighty's voice, to stay and do this. Now, not to say that going to weddings is not vitally important. I'm not minimizing that, and there's a time and place for that, and there's good. It would be wonderful to go also, but to do it at the expense of advancing our knowledge of prayer, and so many people who benefit from learning this, and they benefit others, and this message of hope spreads. It appeared to me the right thing to do is to stay and to learn together this, and that's why I wanted to share that with you, to make it apparent that Everything we're doing is by choice. This is just because it's scheduled every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock to learn together, doesn't mean that doesn't merely mean that this is something to take for granted. No, it comes at an expense of other things, because this is how we determine and believe that this is the best use of our time at this moment in time.